Get ready to fall asleep because we are going to dig into the math behind the escrow analysis calculations. Let's start with an idealized situation, right? You know you're going to spend $1,500 in taxes and insurance on a property, so you divide that by 12, that's $125 a month. And then the escrow with no opening balance, you collect $125 every month until it eventually adds up to the full $1,500. And at the end of the year, when you make your final payments, you're left with no money in the escrow account. Piece of cake, right? You divide what you're going to spend by 12. You don't have any security buffer, and all the numbers are exactly as you expect them to be. That's great, but real life is often different. You may end up paying the property taxes at a different time, or you may get a notification that the property taxes have gone up, and now you don't have the right amount, and you've been collecting a different amount all year. And what do you do about that? Well, that's where the laws for RESPA kick in. See, RESPA started because lenders realized that the amount of money they were collecting wasn't enough when the property taxes or insurance premiums would go up. So lenders would start to collect more than that amount. And everything was fine until some lenders decided they wanted to collect even more and they were going to hold on to that money. And suddenly they were sitting on a pile of the borrower's money that the borrower had no recourse for, saying, hey, give me back my escrow money. You don't need 10 grand when my property taxes are only $1,000 a year. RESPA kicks in and says, hey, lenders, you can't sit on the borrower's money unreasonably. You're allowed, they set a limit of a 2-month reserve. So if you take this $1,500 and you divide it by 6, right? If you divide by 12, that's 1 month, and multiply by 2, that's 2 months. So dividing by 6 gives you 2 months. So over 1,500, divide by 6, and that's $250. That's the reserve we're allowed to have based on $1,500 of expected annual expenses. Now that we know what the reasonable amount we're allowed to be holding at the lowest point in the year, the way it's described is whichever month ends up being the lowest month. So if you have to pay the property taxes earlier in the year, that's going to become the lowest month, right? Where minus 375 is as low as our balance ever gets. If we had to pay the insurance 2 months later, then that would be our lowest balance at 625. And according to the law, this month, when we're at our lowest, we're allowed to still have $250 left in our account. So I have here the lowest balance, which is just the minimum. You can see it's the minimum of whatever these values are. And the overage or shortfall is just that lowest balance minus the reserve. So we're actually short by $875. And this occurs in July, which is the 7th month, which means we actually want the borrower to pay us $250 a month in escrow so that on this lowest month, we have a reserve of $250. So if we plug $250 in here, we can see on the lowest month, we now have exactly a 2-month reserve. And so this is the math that Moneylender does for us. In the idealized situation, we collect $125. There's no opening balance. The expenses are at the very end of the year. Then we'd end up with a balance of 0 at the end. Now, we should have a balance of $250 if we're allowing ourselves that 2-month buffer. So if we take that $250 on the 12th month, that gives us a total of $1,500 plus $250. We have 12 months to collect that money. So that gives us $1,750, the reserve plus the total expenses. Divide by how many months we have to collect it, and that gives us $145.83, right? And if we look at Moneylender, I've set up that same situation where we have our $2,500 or sometime in December. And if we set this to January 1st of 2023 as the period in question, we start with a balance of 0. We have $1,500. Our minimum balance is $250. And it wants us to collect $145.83. And that's exactly what we come up with by doing the math by hand in Excel. So this whole structure that you see in this Excel spreadsheet, this is the logic and math that's happening under the hood when you run the escrow adjustment calculator. So that's the perfect situation, right? where the money's at the very end, there's whatever, there's no opening balance, the easiest possible situation to deal with. But what happens when you pay the money sooner in the year? Let's say property taxes are due in July and the insurance premium is due in May. Okay, so now our lowest balance here is in July, which is the 7th month. And that gives us, we're actually negative. If we're only collecting $125 by the time we hit July, there's $625 negative after we pay the taxes. We've basically made a free loan to the borrower for $625 where we collect no interest until we eventually get that money paid back to us. So in that situation, if we have 7 months to collect, it's the same $1,500 expenses plus $250 reserve. We've only got 7 months to collect it, so we want to collect $250 a month. And if we change this number to $250, we can see that as the balance adds up, and then we pay the insurance, and then we pay the property taxes. After we paid property taxes, we have just that 2-month reserve left in the account, and then it piles up again. So if we were to make that same adjustment here of July and May, so if we go to the property taxes are in July and the insurance is in May. Okay, so now we've changed the property insurance and taxes to be in July and in May. And if we run the adjustment calculator and set it for January of 2023, it says, hey, they need to pay $250 to cover this, to have this full $1,500 in the account by the time we're going to be paying it out. So that's the $250. And when the money goes out, we'll have our $250 reserve in the account. So that's where this number comes from, to make sure that this amount is what's left in the account when all the dispersals are done at the lowest month. So if we move the insurance, so it's much later in the year, then the timing of when that lowest balance happens, the first time we hit minus 125 is here in July, and that gives us a shortfall of that gives us a shortfall of 375 at the 7th month. So to compensate for that, we have a difference of $1,250, and we want a monthly escrow of $178.57. If we had $178.57, then we have $250. We have our expected amount in the escrow account for July. And if I adjust this, so this happens in November, just like the escrow sheet, we can see that 178.57, Moneylender has done the exact same math here. 125. 178.57 is the number it wants. Okay. So in situations like this, you get a recommended deposit. If the amount is greater than this number divided by 12, so there's a shortfall somewhere, then you have the option as a lender of requesting a deposit to the escrow account from the borrower. In this case, $375 would allow you to do a charge of $125 and finish out the year with an appropriate balance in the escrow account. So if we had a $375 starting balance, we could collect $125 throughout the year, and we'd end exactly where we started at $375. And here at the lowest month, we would have $250. RESPA has one more option, which is to take that deposit amount and prorate it over 12 months. So if we take the monthly, would take the deposit, divide by 12, and add the monthly amount, that's $156.25. So instead of saying, give me one check for $375, let's divide that by 12 and add that to the escrow every month. And that's this $156.25 right here. Timing is super important when you pay this money. If it was $1,000 due in February, these numbers look insane, right? we start to see, so that's just the second month, and we have a zero deposit. Oh, I took out the 500. Hold on. Let's say we're putting our 500 in March, right? So now it's a big mess. Now it's just crazy. We've got $1,000 goes out after just 2 months, and then another 500 the month after. Our lowest balance here is going to be this one minus 1,200, and that puts us 1,450 under at just month 3. So we want a monthly escrow amount of, it's a third of the total cost for the year because we've only got 3 months to collect it, the 583.33. If we do the same thing in Moneylender, where property taxes are in February, edit that and make it February, and the insurance is in March. So now we're paying that way sooner in the year when we go back and say, starting in January, 583.33 in order to make sure that, so if we plug that in, 583.33, we've got $250 at the lowest month throughout the year. But the huge problem with this is if you keep collecting for the rest of the year like this, you're going to have $5,500, which is 3 times the annual expenses. So that's you're gonna have to refund them back a check for $5,000, and that's not ideal. That's not what we want either. So that's where Moneylender's other options come in, where it says, hey, we're paying this early in the year, but if they send us a check for $1,375, they can make payments of $125. So if we plug that in, $1,375 is the opening balance, and then payments of $125. Here in March, we have our 2-month buffer of $250. And at the end of the year, we start off right where we were so that when we have to pay it again, they don't have to make another deposit. There's just the right amount of money in the account. And last but not least, if we take that $1,375, divide it by 12, and add it to the $125, then we get $239.58. And that is right here, where we take the $1,375 deposit, divide by 12, and that gives us that number. So if they make just this payment, $239.58, right? So it's $1,375 is what we have at the end of the year. $239.58, but no deposit. We have $1,375 essentially at the end of the year. So these are the different mechanisms that Moneylender is running to come up with the correct escrow account amounts for you for the year. It does require a certain amount of judgment on your part to say 583 is insanely unreasonable. That's not what we want. And 115 is too low. Well, maybe they'll send me a deposit, or I don't want to ask for a deposit. Let's just make it 239. And if 239 is too much, you as the lender can actually do them a favor and just make it 200 or whatever you want. If 125 covers what you expect to spend, we can choose, choose to set the charge. And actually, let's just delete that. Yeah. So we can just override, we can set it to whatever amount we want. So seeing that, 239 is like a higher estimate and 125 is a lower estimate, just give me 200, okay? So we started the year with 0 and we'll have 900 by the end of the year. So a year from now, we'll be in better shape than we were this year, but I'm not like making you fund in that $1,300 shortfall all at once. I'm giving you more time than that. Or really anything over 125 would be fine in this situation. We start off with 0, we end up with 300. Now, if the property taxes go up, then this number is going to be a lot lower. So, you don't want to be super duper forgiving, but, pick a number that's reasonable to you, that's generally going to be in between. Let's put this back to 125. And go back to our charge calculator for January. So you pick a number that's going to be in between like this number and this number if there's a big shortfall. If this number is just crazy, then you can choose this, or somewhere in between these two. You don't want to be less than this, or you'll end up in a worse situation next year. Or if the property taxes or insurance go up, you'll be in a worse situation next year. And if you do this amount, then you'll be in a great situation, like the legally allowed correct situation next year. So anywhere in between these two will put you and the borrower in a better position for their escrow account. And that's only if there's a shortfall. If there's an overage, like let's put some money in the escrow account. Oh, that's the auto pay button. Here we go. Regular payment, escrow only. So let's just have the borrower deposit. We'll say $1,500, right? So starting 12/1/2022. So prior to the year that we're doing our assessment, there's already money in the escrow account. Now, when we run the adjustment calculator for 1/1/2023, it says we actually start the year off with $1,500. Now, we're going to be paying $1,500, and that happens, we're still in February and March, but this is the ideal situation. When it's early in the year, you already have $1,500 in the escrow account, so that we're in good shape. When we pay these, the money's there to cover it. We don't see the account go negative, and we're all set. And we see in our escrow calculation, in our Excel calculation, 8333. And Moneylender has done that exact same math and come up with 8333. So that's where we get this 11538 suggestion, right? When you have more money than you're supposed to, you don't want to make it 8333, right? Because what happens next year is if we make it 8333, we only have 999.96. So instead of 1,500, we have 999.96 rolling into the following year. And at that point, we're going to end up slowly whittling away. Moneylender gives you this suggested for overfunded option. If you've got too much money in the escrow account, one, you can just cut a check, right? You can pay out, hey, I've got $1,500. That's too much money. I need to give you some of it back. But if you're not going to do that, and it's kind of up to you how much you wanna refund to them, and then you do this escrow adjustment afterwards. But if you're doing an annual escrow adjustment, you don't have to refund it every year because you'll never have this massive surplus. It's only if suddenly like you don't have to pay property taxes ever again, which isn't going to happen, or you don't have to pay the insurance ever again, which if the borrower takes those responsibilities over and you're comfortable with that, then that's fine. But otherwise, these numbers aren't going to go away and they're not going to go down. So in that case, what Moneylender will do is it'll say, instead of spreading this over 12 months, let's spread it over 13 months, and then we'll just not collect the 13th payment. And so that'll put you 1/13 of this amount less at the end of the year. So 11538 instead of 125, we start with 1,500, and next year we're 1,384. So we're a little lower, but we don't really want the amount to go up and down and up and down over and over. So we try to have this escrow be as smooth and flat as possible. And that's where all your different options come from. That's how all that math works. So I hope you enjoyed your nap. You can wake up now because the video is over. Thanks for watching. Thank you for choosing Moneylender Professional. Happy lending.